she goes into this trance. It's almost like she got possessed, and she started speaking about some things that happened to me in the past that I never told anybody. So I'm wearing these beads and I'm on this date with this woman. I start explaining to her, I'm like, oh yeah, these are my blessed beads from saints. And she's like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, those aren't saints, those are demons. And then I get a phone call that says, Jon, the saints are mad at you. I was like, oh, we making threats now? So they didn't tell me this before I got there, but they wanted a sperm sample.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview on the LT World YouTube channel or the Like the World podcast, wherever you get this on. So welcome again. And today we have with us Jon Clash. Jon Clash, feel free to introduce yourself.
What's up, guys? Jon Clash here, as was just said. I'm excited to have this conversation. I really enjoy LT's channel, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you on as well. And for anyone who doesn't know anything about you, do you want to just tell them a little bit about what you do or some stuff like that?
Yeah, I guess in the YouTube world, I guess I'm a content creator. I'm an unpopular, I've titled myself the unpopular Christian influencer. So, yeah, on YouTube, I do Christ-centered content. Sometimes we'll do some cultural commentary. We'll talk about a few things going on in the church. Sometimes we'll do some discernment. But one thing that I'm really passionate about is highlighting other Christian content creators, because I can only do so much, and people are way more talented and way more theologically sound and just way better than me at many things, and LT being one of them.
Yeah, I'm also glad to be working with you, Jon. It's actually been a lot of fun these past few weeks that we've been doing stuff together. But one of the reasons why I have you on today is because you weren't always a Christian. You weren't always involved in this content creation world. You were involved with something else, something completely different. If you don't mind just saying what it is and give us a little description about it.
Yeah, so I was involved in Santeria, and I'll break down exactly what that is, but I want whoever's listening to understand that I kind of had a double life going on, right? So in one of my lives, I'm agnostic, borderline atheist, eventually becoming hostile towards Christianity. And then in my other life that's going on at the same time, I'm participating in this thing called Santeria. And for those of you who don't know what Santeria is, it's essentially worshiping the saints, right? Not like how Catholics venerate the saints. This is like literal worship of what they call saints. But if you dig into it further, you find out that they're not actually the Catholic saints. They're actually spirits, and they call them orishas, which are gods from West Africa. So it's an African spirituality that kind of molded with Roman Catholicism and gave us Santeria. So I was participating in that, and it's a pretty interesting. The origins of it are interesting, but it was more interesting of how I even got involved in it, because I'm a white dude, and this is mostly, I don't know if you could tell, but I'm a white dude, and this is mostly Latinos are involved in this, and it's in the Latin culture. And I was not in the Latin culture. I just had Latin friends. I had Spanish friends. So they invited me one time. They were like, Jon, you got to come see this lady. She'll tell you your future. And I was with it. I at the time I wanted to be a famous rapper. So even though I was borderline atheist, I wanted to know my future. I wanted somebody to tell me I'm going to be a famous rapper. That's pretty much what I wanted to know. I didn't want to know my actual future. I wanted to know the future that I wanted to happen, right? So I went to this event, and it was so crazy. I walked in there, and there was music playing. It was people were drinking beer, smoking cigars, and it just seemed like a party to me. And I'm like, oh, it's pretty cool. I never been to a psychic like this. Like, that's what I thought that this was a psychic. This lady's going to tell us our future, right? So it's like a whole bunch of times going by, and there's also other things too that were a little off. It wasn't just like a party. There was candles lit. There was like an altar set up. There was, just picture any weird like voodoo seance movie that you've ever seen. It kind of looked like that, except a little less creepy, because it was just regular people. Nobody was dressed crazy. Nobody was like, there's nobody tweaking out or anything. Everybody's just hanging out, drinking beer, smoking cigars. I'm like, oh, it's pretty legit. This is the most fun psychic I've ever been to. Not like I have a whole run of psychics, but I've been to a couple of them. And so anyway, things kind of shifted as it got later. And this woman that I actually knew, but I didn't know that she was the woman that was going to, quote unquote, tell us our future. She goes into this trance, and it's almost like she got possessed, which she did, but I'm trying to filter this through the lens of me first seeing it, right? So I'm watching this go on, and she completely changes who she is as a person and starts acting crazy, right? Not crazy as in like scary crazy, but just crazy for her. She was a completely different person. And now she's drinking and smoking cigars. And one thing that I noticed is she had a sash or a bandana, and it was like silk kind of, right? And when she changed into whatever she changed into, she took one of the sashes and kind of put it around herself. And so what I didn't realize at the time was I was witnessing her channeling whatever spirit this is. And what they would tell us is that these are the saints, like Saint Michael, Saint John, Saint Lazarus, like all of these different saints. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they would tell you that this woman is turning into. She's being possessed by these saints, so that way she can tell us how to fix our lives. Not her telling us, but the saints telling us how to fix our lives and how to, what's going to happen to you in the future and all of these different things. So I'm watching it and I'm just like, man, this is some trippy stuff. Like, I'm like an outsider looking at all this stuff. And I'm like, this is bugged out, but whatever. I'm just waiting to get to the point where they start telling your fortunes, because I just want to know my future. Mm-hmm. So then she changes sashes and she turns into another person, a completely different personality. Right. And I'm like, what is going on here? So you got to understand, man, I got zero spiritual discernment when all of this is going on. I'm just watching it as like, a borderline atheist, agnostic. The most that I really believed about the spiritual realm was that people could tell me your future and maybe ghosts exist, because I would watch, the things on TV, those scary TV shows where they, the house is haunted or whatever. And then they got to do a seance to get rid of it. So anyway, I was into that stuff. So this happens multiple times. She changes to a different person, changes to a different person, changes to a different person. Finally, she goes around and starts asking people, starts talking to people. So I'm like, oh, I guess this is it. This is the part where she starts telling people their future. And she'll tell people things and then go back into her trance and switch into somebody else and then go tell some other people some things. And
so
then go back.
One question I have right now is, while this was happening, what was everyone else doing? Was everyone else still drinking it up and smoking, or were they actually?
They were chilling. I'm like, what? So the fact that they were also comfortable made me comfortable. Okay. Plus, I knew about half of the room, so that that put me at ease. We've done some way crazier things than what was going on in front of me. This was just a different type of crazy. So I was more just like tripped out by it. I'm watching it like, this is some wild stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, she finally gets to me and she starts talking to me in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. I'm much better now because I live in Puerto Rico, but at that time, no hablo español, right? So she starts talking to me, and then my friend is translating it. And the first bugged out thing was I would respond after my friend would translate. I would respond and answer the question that she asked me or respond to whatever she was saying. And this woman would just start talking again, essentially answering my question or responding to what I was saying. And I knew that this woman didn't speak English. So here I am answering in English. She's not waiting for the translator and she's answering me. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty bugged out. And it's not like maybe she knew English. No, I know that this woman did not know English.
You said you kind of knew her outside of this event, right?
Yep. So I don't want to get into who she is because I don't want to throw, I don't want to, just in case somebody who knows her or somebody who knows her, hears about this. These are conversations that I like to directly have with people. But anyway, so she starts now telling me about things, and she started speaking about some things that happened to me in the past that I never told anybody. Right. So I'm like, now it's really hitting me. I'm like, oh, this is legit. This isn't just some weird stuff that I'm experiencing. Whatever is going on here is real, because I've never told anybody this. Then she also spoke about my my father's father passed away when my father was 11, right? And she told me that this man, my father's father, has been following me my whole entire life, watching over me essentially, right? And I'm like, how does this lady know that my father's father is dead? She knew things about my life that nobody could have possibly known. There was no like quick Google search you could do on me or anything. So that got me to the point that I was like, okay, this is legit. And then she told me about my future, and she told me what I wanted to hear. She's like, oh, I know you want to be on stages. I know you want to do music. I know you want to be famous. I know all of this. And we can make that happen for you. It's a single person saying we can make that happen for you. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's do it. How do we make this happen?
You were instantly sold on it. Like there was no red flags whatsoever.
I didn't care. You got to understand. So here's a little background of me. At the time, I was doing drugs, selling drugs. People who invited me were gang members. So these were people that I was in the streets with as well. Like this was a period of my life where I didn't care about anything. Fair enough. So the red flag, I'm like, this lady tell me she gonna do this stuff for me. What's the worst that could happen? It doesn't happen. Oh, well, my life goes on. This is my mentality with it, right? Now, I think that what she's saying is legit because she knows about all of this stuff. But at the same time, I'm just like, whatever. I looked at it like a good luck charm. She says she can get all this stuff to happen. Let's see it, let's see what's up. So they tell me that I have to make an altar in my house. I got to buy these candles. I got to put this statue. I got to put like little food out and stuff. Essentially,
like, is there certain food that, like, was there certain like type of candle, certain type of food, like stuff like that? Or is it just kind of like whatever you're able to provide?
So since they say that since it's the saints, right? That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
If you go to any grocery store that's in an urban area, you'll see the candle section, and in the candle section there'll be candles that are just these straight candles that are just one color, right? And then some of them you'll see, like Jesus will be on one of them, Saint Lazarus will be on another, Saint John will be on. If you've ever seen them, you know what I'm talking about. So those were the ones that I'm supposed. Those are the ones that I was supposed to buy, and they actually have stores as well. They have botanicas, which is these like spiritual stores that you could go and buy all this stuff from. So, but I just went to I knew they had them at the corner store, so I went to the corner store and bought that stuff. So then I had to buy a bowl. I had to cook fish, and the fish had to be cooked a certain way. I had somebody else cook it because I can't cook fish. So and then I put it all out. Now the fish didn't have to stay there. It's not like I had to leave it there and have my whole apartment stinking or anything like that. But it just had to start. Like I just had to leave it there for a couple of days. So anyway, they tell me to make this altar, do these things, read the things that are on the back of the candles, and just make sure the candles are always lit and whatever. So I start doing it. And I really enjoyed my experience there, right? Even though it was like really weird and bugged out, this first experience, I had a lot of fun. I was with my friends. We drank beer. We smoked cigars. We got our futures told. And then they said, hey, you do this stuff, good things will happen to you. I'm like, wow, that's a good night right there. So
and so when you set up these altars, was there also like, do you had to like pray or something, or just had to read what was on the back of the candles?
So the back of the candles was essentially prayers.
Okay.
So I would pray it. But I didn't put really too much faith into it. You know what I mean? It's not like I was like, oh, Saint Lazarus. You know, I'm going through the motions here because I'm like, what's the worst that could happen? So anyway, I start doing that stuff and my music career actually starts moving. And I'm like, oh, this is legit, right? So I won 2 underground music awards. I was getting noticed by people like Jadakiss, other people from Yonkers, big Yonkers rappers, right?
Okay.
I was being managed by somebody from Cash Money Records. I was in meetings with G Unit and all this good stuff is happening.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, it's pretty legit. So what I do, I just made sure that my candles were lit and my things were going on. I didn't think anything too far into it, right? But I always was looking forward to the next party, because that's what I looked at it, like party. I would ask my friend, when are the saints coming? Because it would just be, the woman would get like a revelation and she'd be like, it's tonight, right? And so you got to drop everything and boom, go do it. So I would look forward to these things. And as I participated.
And so was she like dedicated to that region, like almost like a pastor or something in like a Christian context?
I don't know. She wasn't from Yonkers. She was from the Heights, but she was close to the people that that hosted the events, right? So I guess maybe she was I wouldn't say that area, but she was connected to those people.
Okay.
Right. And
it's just kind of interesting because like it just sounds like almost like it wasn't a regular weekly meeting or anything. It was just whenever, spur of the moment.
Yep. Sometimes you get a little advance notice, but for the most part. So if somebody, like we eventually got to a point where I had to do my own, right? So that was planned. You obviously have to plan that. But for the most part, it's like, hey, it's going down tonight. You better be there. So.
And so then how many people were involved in this when you were attending these meetings? Like,
so there was a few solid people that kept going, but everybody would always invite people, right? So you would invite people and then some people would stay, some people wouldn't. It's like anything you invite people to, right? Some people show up, some people don't. You invite somebody to movies, sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't, right? You know, we invite people to church all the time. We invite them, they go, some stay, some don't. It's a numbers game. So it was a core group of us, but then there was always extra people as well. And there was sometimes where the saints would be supposed to be coming and somebody would invite people and then the saints wouldn't come because of that person's energy. Now I probably know that was a born again Christian sitting there and they were like, yeah, we not showing up for this one.
Interesting.
But so anyway, as I've started going to these things, they started getting progressively weirder, right?
How so?
The possessions got weirder. Also, the parties got more intense, right? Like she would throw wax on you, hot wax on people, and she would, depending on which saint she was, right? And we're gonna break down in a little bit how, you know, certain orishas are disguised as certain saints and how there's so many fractions of this, and this is not like there's no text for this stuff. It's all passed down word of mouth.
So there's no like Bible, Quran, nothing like that. It's just oral tradition.
Yep, it's all oral tradition. So anyway, fast forward, I get to this one ceremony. I remember this like so clear, and this lady transforms into one of these things. I wish I knew more back then, but anyway, she breaks a glass over her head.
Oh.
And yeah, that's it gets crazier. She breaks the glass over her head. She smashes the pieces on the floor and then picks up the pieces and starts eating them.
What? Wait,
and this
what?
Bro, this is happening right next to me. Like I'm sitting on the floor. We're all sitting because this was actually a much smaller place where we were doing this at. So it's literally like like a bunch of people sitting in a little circle, and this is going on. This is right next to me. She's smacking
Wouldn't that cut up her mouth? Wasn't she like start bleeding a lot?
So she didn't bleed. Nothing.
What? There's
Yeah.
no way.
This is when I'm like, oh, nah, this is some legit crazy stuff. Like I wouldn't say I had red flags going on because things in my life were going well. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got no spiritual discernment. I'm not in church. I'm not being discipled. I don't know none of this stuff. I'm just like, hey, man, let's get rich. You know, like that's my mentality. So she's eating this glass next to me, and I'm like, what the? Now I'm a little, I'm rationalizing this in my head, right? I'm like, this is crazy. Some ain't right. But then I'm like, well, maybe it is right. Maybe this is her showing how powerful these saints are, and that she can ingest this glass and not be hurt by it, right? This is what I'm thinking. So anyway, I continue doing the seances or whatever, and then I go on a date with a woman, and so they gave me beads. They gave me these blessed beads. Nobody's allowed to touch them. They gave me little perfumes to wear, all of these different things, little lotions and potions and like Harry Potter things to everything is for a different thing, right? Hey, wear this if you want to attract people. Huh?
Yeah. So did you wear jewelry and stuff for that date to attract a woman?
Nah. So I just wore the beads. And if you ever see somebody wearing really thin beads that are different colors, right? They're usually wearing 2 or 3 different necklaces. Those are Santeria beads, right? Now, so I'm wearing these beads, and I'm on this date with this woman, and it's a Latina woman, and she's like, what are those beads? And I'm like, oh, you never seen these before? And she's like, yeah, what are they? And here I am, like, this is how stupid I was. I'm like, oh, this chick's a Latina, and she doesn't even know about her own culture. I'm about to school her. This is going to be a good night for me.
I don't think you understood how women worked. I don't think humiliating and making someone feel stupid is the best way to.
I know. This was who I was, though, at the time. You got to understand. I was so full of myself. So anyway, I start explaining to her. I'm like, oh yeah, these are my blessed beads from, the saints. The saints watch over me, and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And so I break down what Santeria is, and she's like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, those aren't saints. Those are demons. And I was like, this chick crazy, right? She's like, yeah, read this in the Bible. I can't tell you what she told me to read because I didn't go read it. But that kind of was awkward, but it planted a seed in me. Like it planted a seed of doubt. I was like, demons, that's crazy. So then I got kind of lazy in my lighting of the candles and all of this stuff. And then I get a phone call that says, Jon, the saints are mad at you. And I'm like, the saints are mad at me. Now, just so you know, this is like a 5-year period. For like maybe 7 years. Yeah.
This was going on for years now.
Yeah. This was a long drawn out period. I had like roller coasters of sometimes I was really into it. Sometimes I was just coasting. Sometimes I, let it go. And also my events might be a little skewed. Like some things might have happened before this whole entire period of my life is a blur. Right. So I get the phone call, and she's like, yeah, the saints are mad at you. They know you haven't been taking care of your altar. And I'm like, what? Like they got cameras in here or something? I had no idea what was going on. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what do I got to do? Cause now I don't want to lose all the good stuff that I got going on. So I'm like, what do I got to do? They're like, you need to do a seance. You need to do this. You need that, blah, blah, blah. So I did the whole seance, did everything. In that seance, they said that if you do not, keep up with what we tell you to do, we're going to take everything from you. And I'm like, I was not somebody who responded well to threats back then. And I took it. I was like, okay. But I was like, oh, we making threats now? This is interesting. Right. So anyway, I went back to doing the things that I was doing, lighting the candles and stuff like that. And then a new year came around. So in the new year, they wanted to give me a cleansing. They said, look, you need a cleansing. You got a lot going on. You've had a crazy year. You need a cleansing. So I'm like, all right, we'll do the cleansing for the new year. New year, new me. All right, new demons. So they do the cleansing, and it's like I had to like shower in this stuff. I had to go to their place. I had to shower in this stuff, and they do this cleansing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is like where it gets really, really weird. So they didn't tell me this before I got there, but they wanted a sperm sample, right?
Oh,
yeah. So
oh,
yeah, I'm telling you, I was involved in some crazy stuff, having no discernment.
And this was after years, you said. So like,
yeah,
they never requested something like this before.
Nah, this was years down the line. I don't know how far down the line, but it was far enough that you got to understand, I knew these people before all of this stuff. So I already had a trust with them. And I thought that they would never lead me in a bad direction. Right. Yeah. I mean, we all did bad things, but
you did bad things together. So maybe. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Right. Which is logically ridiculous. But so anyway, I go through with that, and I still have no idea what that ceremony was for. None at all. Some people have commented in my comments, giving me some ideas about it, but I have no idea what it was for. I just went with it. This is how stupid I was. I just went with this stuff, right? So,
I have to say that you describing that almost reminds me of like in the New Testament, when the Greek culture, it was really common for stuff, not that specifically, but sort of practices that were condemned in Paul's letters, like don't participate in these sort of sexual acts that worship the gods with, and things like that. It sounds like something along those lines almost.
You know what? I've never made that correlation. That was enlightening right there. It's probably true because it all goes back to the same stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it all goes back to Satanism and anything to keep you away from God. If you really dig into all the other worldviews out there, and you just keep digging, it all goes back to the first lie, you know? But anyway, so here I am dealing with like just doing this stuff and going on the ups and downs of it, right?
Yeah.
But I remember in the back of my head, that thing where the lady was like, "Oh yeah, those are demons." It stuck with me, right? So I continued just in coast mode for a while. Then I eventually became a Christian, right? And also understand, I suffered a lot of demonic oppression. I had sleep paralysis like crazy, right?
Wow.
At the time, I chalked it up to, I thought I was dealing with childhood trauma, because you got to understand, even though I'm involved in this like thing that's spiritual, I'm just doing it as like a get rich quick scheme, you know? I'm doing it as like a good luck charm. Hey, if it works, I'm gonna keep doing it. Like that's my mentality. So I'm still not looking at things through a real spiritual lens. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe this stuff is legit, but I don't look at things as like God, Jesus. I don't look at things like that. I'm just like, whatever, spiritual forces, maybe. Good luck, and maybe I'll make some money doing this. I actually spent more money than I made doing that. But anyway, so yeah, I had that seed planted. Then I became a Christian, and I kind of carried this over with me. But as I carried it over, I just wasn't as into it anymore. You know, I was tired of it, and it felt like a chore to me, you know, like, oh, I got to freaking light these stupid candles again. You know, that I got to go buy more candles. I got to light more candles. It's like, once you light it, you go away. It's out. I'm like, oh, I got to keep doing this. So it was frustrating me, but I'm just continuing on it, because now I have this fear of losing everything that I got.
Yeah.
Right. Because now I'm having success in business. killing it. I'm traveling. I'm driving a BMW. Like all this good stuff is happening to me. Good worldly stuff. As good as subjective in that sense. But then I had a conversation with one of my spiritual mentors, Christian spiritual mentors, not these other ones. And he was just talking about heaven and the book of Revelation. And we were at Del Frisco's in New York City, fancy steak place. And it was a bunch of people that I did business with. And I don't know how we got into talking about God, but he's talking about the new heavens and the new earth and just all of this stuff. And I'm like, dang, this dude is right. Right. And so I went home and I just destroyed the altar, like absolutely destroyed it. And I also think that I looked into the origins of it at that point, but I was still continuing doing it anyway, because I remember looking into the origins, and we'll talk about that in a second. But when I looked into them, I was like, oh, this is really bugged out. This is not even what they're saying that it is, right?
Yeah.
So after I did that, and then here I'm having this conversation with somebody that I really respected in all areas of life, I went home and I tore down the altar. I didn't even know what I was doing. I'm like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, not knowing that stuff, like, that's not how this works, you know? So I break everything. I throw stuff. I bury it in the, in the woods. I just got rid of it. And I was like, never again. And as they said it would be, so it was. My business started going backwards. Things started getting messed up. My relationship that I was living in sin but, at the time, stopped going well. It just, my life went into chaos. But I made a decision. I was like, there's no way that I'm ever going back to worshiping these saints. Just so I get good stuff happening. I was so mad that I did this stuff for years, right? Now, back to the research that I did. So here they are telling you that it's the saints. And I'm believing that, all right, if they're saying it's Catholic saints, it's the Catholic saints. I don't know any better, right?
Yeah.
But now I'm starting to know better, because, I'm researching these things. This was one of the first like rabbit holes I went down in research, and it started my love for researching origins. So I find out that this isn't even a Latin thing. This comes from Africa, right? So what happened was the African slave trade, right? When they brought them over, and it first started in Cuba, right? So when they brought them to Cuba, the Africans brought over their African spirituality, right?
Is this an affiliation with the Yoruba religions at all?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I read a book, God Is Not One, where it covers all the major religions, and like number 5 in the world or whatever is like Yoruba religions, which is like collectively, but it's like not really homogenous, but it's very diverse in how they beliefs, but it's kind of similar in how they practice it. Yeah,
it's literally that religion repackaged, because when Christopher Columbus he made it so that way there could be no other, not Christopher Columbus, but Spain made it so that there's no other religions except Catholicism. When they brought over slaves, it was like mass baptisms. Nope, you baptize, you're a Catholic now, right? There was no, you could not practice your own spirituality. So what they did was they hid it. They, instead of worshiping, let's say Baba Luae, which is one of their gods, right? Instead of worshiping him, they worshiped Saint Lazarus, because they associated healing and health and stuff like that with Saint Lazarus, because he rose from the dead. So they associated that with Baba Luae, which is their god for those same things in their original religion. So you can make that correlation between all of them. There's Saint Mary is connected with one, Saint John connected with another one, Saint James connected with another one. They're all connected to different saints. In my specific sect that I was in, there's 21 different saints, right?
Yeah.
And 21. So you could have a guardian angel, a guardian saint, right? Each person is usually assigned one. I was assigned all 21 of them. They asked the lady who was possessed, they said, oh, well, who's his saint? They're asking for me, who's his saint? And she said, all of them. At the time, I felt special. Now looking back, I'm like, dang, these demons wanted me. you know. Um,
You were the chosen one for the wrong reasons.
I know. Here I am, like, yes, and little did I know. But it all makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The further I got into down in my journey with Christ, it all makes sense why they would want to stop that.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I started studying the origins of it, and I'm like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that I'm not even worshiping saints. I'm worshiping whatever these dudes are worshiping that brought this over.
Mm-hmm.
So these aren't really saints. So I'm worshiping some other god that's disguised as a saint. So I'm like, you guys are lying about this. You got to be lying about other stuff too.
Yeah.
Like, this is when I started really piecing things together. And
Do you think like the lady who was leading these seances and stuff like actually knew the origins of everything and like knew it was all cover up, or do you think they actually believe it's the saints?
So I think that they believe that the saints are those gods.
Okay.
So it's so fractioned that there are some sects of it that do believe that they are the actual saints. Then there's people who are more honest about it or more knowledgeable about it, who practice it, that understand that we're not worshiping the saints, we're worshiping these other gods. We're just continuing with tradition and using the saints as those gods, but they'll worship the specific gods themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
But so there's different sects of it, right? There's, like, I told you, mine has 21 saints. There's other ones that have 400 different gods in their pantheon. There's this one, as I was researching all this stuff, there's this one guy who says you have 400 plus one. And they say 400 plus one because God could always create another Orisha to help benefit.
I read that in that book I told you about. He talked about how some believe that God can be created or intermingle and things and have children. And like, I was just like, oh, interesting.
Yeah. The superstition that comes with it is crazy too, because, you couldn't let anyone touch your beads. I had friends who, when they would go swimming, they wouldn't pee in the ocean because they didn't want to upset the goddess of the river. I forget what her name is, but I remember one of my friends specifically, he's like, I got to find a bathroom. And I'm like, oh, you got to go number 2? And he's like, nah, I gotta go number 1. I'm like, bro, just go in the water. And he's like, nah, I can't. I don't want to upset the goddess of the water. And I'm like, what?
And what's interesting,
that got in my head.
What's interesting is that, like, what you're talking about as well, like, the moment you start engaging with it seems like that's when the control starts to happen with, like, the gods, demons, whatever you want to call them, because obviously other human beings out there who don't even acknowledge them and don't even really care about the religion or worship a different god or whatever it may be, like, whenever they do these things, there's not even a second thought about it, and there's no correlation with anything bad happening in their life or anything like that. But in the case of, like, someone who actually starts going down this pathway, start engaging with it, start believing it, start worshiping these demons, there is actually a level of, like, control there that actually does impact their life when they do these things. I think that's kind of like an interesting thing to observe. Because as you said, when you started worshiping the saints, you notice changes in your trajectory in life.
Yeah. And it is about control. If you think about it, right? What's the devil's plan? To get you to worship everything else except Jesus. That's his plan, right? Mm-hmm. However he can get you to do that. If he wants to call them saints, you want to call them orishas, you want to call them spirit guides, you want to call them guardian angels, you want to call them anything. As long as you're not worshiping the one true God, that's all that matters. Mm-hmm. If he can keep you from paying attention to Jesus Christ and putting your faith fully in Jesus Christ, then he's going to get you however he can get you, right? Yeah. And they also trick you into thinking that you can do this alongside of whatever religion you participate in. So here I am doing this stuff. And since when I was younger, we went to Catholic church, I'm like correlating some of this stuff and thinking like, maybe it's all right, because it's the saints. And since I don't know any better, I'm just like, yeah, all right, cool. Yeah, let's do it. Right. But this is why it's also so rampant in the Latin culture and Latin countries. in general, because, even out here in Puerto Rico, it's you can go into churches and see the same exact thing. There's people worshiping the saints in churches. You go to Cuba, the churches are falling apart, but everybody's got altars in their house. I've never been to Cuba. This is just, I'm being told. Even Fidel Castro participated in Santeria. There's actually a famous speech that he made where the doves flew on him, right? You can look up this speech. It's like a 2-hour long speech. And these doves, white doves, landed on him, right? And this is how superstition works. He knew that, so he was Catholic and he also participated in Santeria, right?
Yeah.
And he knew that the Cuban people participated in Santeria and were Catholic as well. So for 2 weeks leading up to this speech, he trained these pigeons to land on him, because a white dove, it's not a pigeon, it's a white, a dove, it's the symbol of one of their gods. And by that white dove landing on him, it's like that God affirming what he's saying. And also, if you associate it with, the Holy Spirit descended like a dove. So here you cover in the Catholics as well. So this manipulation, you can manipulate people just by understanding what they believe and using that to their advantage. And, there's also people who believe that that's the reason why Fidel Castro, in such a crazy life that he lived, survived every single assassination attempt, like lived really old. He did quote unquote good for himself in taking over that country. But this is what superstition gets you. Think about how deeply rooted you have to be in superstition to believe that Fidel Castro had your best interests at hand, and then he takes over the country and devastates it. So this is the end result of believing so wholeheartedly in something as demonic as this. And I know that there might be people who listen to this who may be practicing Santeria, and they think that they're doing, because there's people who practice quote unquote the dark side of it, then there's people who practice the quote unquote light side of it. All of it's sorcery in my eyes, and all of it's demon worship in my eyes.
What's the distinguishment, or how do they distinguish it?
So they distinguish it like this. You can go to some people and pay them to put like curses on other people, right? So this is also a business too, you got to understand. So I can go to a botanica and find the person who runs it and say, hey, this guy's messing with me. I want to curse him. And so they'll go through the process. You pay them, they'll curse him. So what they'll do though, is they'll consult the orishas. And if the orishas say, yeah, you could screw that guy over, then they'll go do it. But if they say you can't, then they won't. But there are some people who will just do it anyway. Right. So this is how they justify putting curses on people and hexing people and doing all that stuff. I remember there was one where you would put your name, so you would put somebody's name. I never did this, but some of my friends did. You put somebody's name in like a vial or something like that, and then you put it in your freezer, and that supposedly locks them up for life. Like they can never get ahead. They're stuck in life. So that's one of the curses that you can put on somebody. So the whole light and dark thing, as well as I do, there's no difference when you're doing it. Your sorcery is condemned in the Bible. Consorting with the dead is condemned in the Bible. That's another thing too that's big in Santeria, ancestor worship and consulting your ancestors and stuff like that as well. So there's like so much to it, man. And if you listen to my story and you're somebody else who participates in Santeria, you'd be like, yeah, then that's not Santeria. That's not how that works. That's not, because it's so fractioned and there's so many different ways of doing this and so many different, I forget what they call them, but santeros who practice this stuff, that you could learn something different from everybody that you go to, and you could practice something different everywhere that you go to, but it all just stems back to those Yoruba religions and practices.
Yeah. And I think that's why these type of religions are so insidious or so easy to seep into cultures and kind of blend in, is because they adapt so easily since they lacked a strong doctrine. So like Christianity or Islam or Judaism, those type of religions have a pretty strong dogmatic or pretty strong dogma to them that they may be able to adapt to culture, but generally speaking, they will try to really change, and it's noticeable. Versus a religion like that, where it kind of adapts, molds with the people, will try to blend in and sneak into their own religion and become a part of it because it lacks a dogma, and it kind of becomes what you make it.
Yeah.
At least that's what it seems.
Yeah, it's like you have a basic layout of how this is supposed to go, and then you can freestyle it.
Yeah,
That's essentially what it is. You do XYZ, but everything else, make it up as you go.
It almost makes me think of did you ever read Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis?
No, it's on I literally just packed it yesterday, and I was like, dang, I got to read this.
So there's a chapter in Screw Tape Letters. If you know the premise of it, Wormwood and like a intern demon are having letters back and forth.
Yeah.
And one of the letters, Wormwood tells the apprentice demon dude, he's like, hey, if you want to tempt a Christian, here's something you can do. Always make sure it's God and something else, or always make sure it's Jesus and something else. Like never ever just make it about them. Like they can have God, they can have that, but always make sure there's something else that they need as well. And that's kind of like what the Santeria thing sounds like to me. It's like you can have God, you can have Catholicism, you can have whatever it is, but always make sure that you add this with it, these practices. Yeah. Like it's kind of like that.
Yeah, and they believe in one God. They believe that there's a God over all the other gods. They call him something else. The name is escaping me right now, but and then that God, it's like a older dude. That's what the God looks like the top dog of it. Yeah. But then they believe in the creator who created all these gods. So they have this like very similar. It's exactly like you're saying. This sounds pretty close to what it is you guys believe, right? This sounds close to Christianity. You have one God, then you have angels, and you have saints, and that sounds really close to what you believe. So when you hear it like that, you're like, yeah, actually, that's about the same thing. And if you're completely spiritually illiterate, as I was, you fall into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it would be interesting, just to get your quick thoughts on this. I see we're approaching about 50 minutes here, but to get your quick thoughts on it, you do make the distinguishment between Catholicism and Santeria. Although I know in my comment section, even though I'm Protestant, I'm not even associated with the Catholic Church, I get comments about Catholicism because a lot of people in other countries associate Christianity strictly with Catholicism. And what sometimes I get a lot of comments of, normally I think people within the Muslim community specifically, is that Catholics worship the saints. But that's not entirely true. What is if you are able to speak into that a little bit, what is the distinction between something like Santeria and what Catholics would do, or at least the breakdown of that?
Yeah. So the issue is that it can look very similar.
Yeah.
It can, you go into a Catholic church, you put the quarter in the thing and you press the button and the candle lights up. That's essentially what you're doing with your altar at home. The only difference that I would say is that in the Catholic Church, they obviously they venerate the saints. They're not like, I mean, some do, like bowing down and kissing the feet of the some do. And I'm talking about general Catholics, right? Like I'm not talking about what their doctrines say, and I'm not going into all of that. I'm just talking about general Catholics. They put Jesus Christ first. They may have their little I forget what saint it is. Saint Francis. If you lose something, ask Saint Francis to find it. They have these little things like that. But when it really comes down to it, Catholics put Jesus Christ first. You put your faith in Christ in order to be saved. With Santeria, it's a little bit more muddy. There's you believe in Jesus. You could even light a Jesus candle. They have a baby Jesus that you can worship as well. It's just really muddied. It's like everything's on the same level.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? I would say in Catholicism, Jesus is not on the same level as the saints. 100% not. Right. Yeah. Jesus is above all of that. Here in Santeria, they may have like one God, but they don't even talk about Jesus like that. They everybody's pretty much an even playing field.
Yeah.
But if you want to worship Jesus, light this candle for him, it's so you can get something specific from doing that. If you want to light this candle for Saint Lazarus, it's so you could have good health. So you light your candle for that. It's all these different things.
And it seems like in Santeria, the gods are an end to themselves. Like the gods are the ones fulfilling everything. While when I talk to Catholics, more traditional Catholics, I mean, there's a lot of different types of Catholics out there as well. But
you can't paint it with a broad brush. It's difficult. The comment section is going to think we're talking about every single Catholic out there. So,
but the ones I've had discussions with, a lot of times it sounds more like in Catholicism, they petition the saints to do something. Mm-hmm. So like, it's like Saint Mary or whatever, they look over certain types of things, or they're involved in certain aspects of the spiritual life. But when you pray, quote unquote, or seek out a saint, it's more like they'll petition on your behalf to God versus them actually having the power to do something themselves. It's that's like it's kind of like they're backing you up in prayer to God, and God then honors them as a saint to help you. I don't know. That's kind of how I always understood it, but yeah.
No, that's a great distinction, and that's, you're 100% spot on. There's, from my understanding and my experience with Santeria, and others, as I said, other sects might do it differently. But when I was involved, it was the saints doing everything. There was no, I'm going to talk to God on your behalf. No, none of that. It was all them doing everything for you. And if you stop worshiping them, they will stop doing things for you.
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely like you scratch my back, I scratch yours. You kind of earn what you get from the religion type mentality.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I learned a lot today about Santeria. Honestly, I didn't know about this religion like whatsoever until I heard your testimony on the, what was that? Was it Why Jesus Network that was on?
Yeah.
Or was that
the
your
Why Jesus
Jon
podcast.
Clash? Was it your channel?
No, it was the Why Jesus podcast. I mean, I have two of them. So one was on there, one's on my channel.
Yeah, okay. So I remember hearing that. I'm like, oh, Santeria. I'm like, I don't think I ever heard of this before. I heard of the Yoruba religions. I was like, it sounds extremely similar to that, based on what I studied about that. But I was like, I didn't know what Santeria was. But this is just intriguing to me because it's the repackaging of it. As you said, that's the thing that makes it so interesting, is that you actually package it like this. And then it doesn't surprise me then when people see that and they actually think this is Christianity. And as you said, like people who participate in Santeria, they actually might call themselves Christians even. They might call themselves Christians as well. When that in reality, they're not even practicing Christian doctrine. They're not reading the Bible or anything. They're not actually living out what would have been taught according to Orthodox Christianity. Yeah. So I think that's just the interesting part of it, is the packaging of this sort of religion.
So it's interesting that you use the analogy of packaging, right? So when in Puerto Rico, they have this thing called the Jones Act, where we're not allowed to receive anything from other countries unless it goes through the United States, right? So it also works this way with meat as well. So as long as something is packaged in the United States, you can slap a USA sticker on it and send it over, right? Okay. So let's say you want to get something from Japan, they send it to the United States slaps a US, packaged in the United States sticker. I'm assuming this is
because Puerto Rico is a territory of US. That's why they have to do that.
Yes, exactly. Right. So they, they stamp the US on it and it sends it over here. But that does not mean it's from the United States. It's not a United States product.
Yeah.
It's just literally got the United States stamp on it. It's the same thing with Santeria. It's not a Catholic product. Mm-hmm. It just has a Catholic stamp on it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's from the Yoruba tribes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thank you for helping explain all that. I think that answers most of the questions I was going to ask, at least, regarding either the origin of Santeria, kind of what they practice, what they believe, and sort of your story. So that covers, I think, pretty much all the bases. So if there's any other concluding thoughts you have to give, feel free. Is there anything else you want to finish off with before we close out?
Nah, I'm pretty good. I appreciate you bringing me on here. I appreciate you wanting to shed light on this stuff. And I think that it's something that goes unnoticed in many Christian communities because it's so underground. So the more people we get talking about it, hopefully we get to meet more people who have who can bring even more clarity to these things than I can.
Well, also interesting to say it's so underground is because what's funny about that is like Yoruba religion specifically have over like 500 million people who follow it, which is, it's like as big, if not, I think bigger than Buddhism at this point. Like it's actually pretty, the Yoruba religions are pretty big, and Santeria is just another form of that. So it's just kind of interesting that you call it underground when in reality it's a massive religion.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So yeah, thank you for coming on, Jon. Glad to have you. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or find your stuff?
If you just Google Jon Clash, Jon Clash, I'll come up. If you just put Jon Clash in YouTube, I'll come up and you'll be able to find me from there. I have all my other links there. And then also you can find me over at the Why Jesus Network.
There we go. I'll drop some of those links down in the description below. If you're interested, you can check out his channel. You can check out Why Jesus Network, all that good stuff. I can't recommend it more. And as always, folks, before I close out, always go out there and light the world yourselves.